Hi, everyone, and welcome to another week in our Digital Literacy and 21st Century Skills series. I'm Solomon, but you call me Clakkey. With me is...
Shannon.
And Jeannell.
How's it going, guys?
Good, how are you?
It's going
I'm doing
good.
good as well. Now, last week we had Kimberly and Ricky who looked at Mayer and Tufts' take on designing effective presentations. This week, we're going to continue that conversation as we take a look at media literacy. And just to create a little context or background, back home in St. Kitts, where I'm from in the Caribbean, we are said to have a 93% literacy rate. And for me, that means that we have a very high percentage of persons that can read. Isn't that fantastic?
Definitely.
Yeah, it is. Well, Clakkey, literacy does not only involve reading. There's a writing component, and you will realize throughout our discourse today, it also includes competence or knowledge in a specific area.
Really now? But I guess when I think about it, that does make sense. If you are versed in an area, you pretty much are literate in it.
Actually, at the 5th meeting of the Global Alliance for Monitoring Learning in October 2018 in Hamburg, Germany, literacy was defined as the actual ability to identify and understand, interpret, create, communicate, and compute using printed and written materials associated with various contexts, but that it also involves a continuum of learning in enabling individuals to achieve their goals, to develop their knowledge and potential, and to participate fully in their community and a wider community.
Wow, Shannon, I'm almost so you're out of breath to all that, because that was a mouthful, and there's so much in there. Like we can have like a few podcasts, just off of that definition alone.
Definitely.
Yeah, the U.S. National Association for Media Literacy Education actually defines literacy as the ability to analyze, access, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication.
And I think that is a good segue for us to look at this week's topic of media literacy. But if you take my very limited interpretation of literacy, and I apply that to what I think media literacy is, then for me it's like having mediums like a CD player or a pen drive to store information on, print media like a news broadcast media like a radio station. Would I be incorrect or correct in my thinking?
Well, there's actually this book that I'm reading by Monica Bulger and Patrick Davison, and they share some interesting viewpoints on this topic in their article, The Promises, Challenges, and Futures of Media Literacy. And essentially, put very simply, media literacy is like the active inquiry and critical thinking about messages that we're actually receiving and creating.
Oh, yeah, I think I actually read that as well.
And to think Teacher Jeannell dinged me some points and only gave me half a point for broadcasting media. But it is one of the ways that we receive messages, don't we?
All right, Clakkey, that's all you got?
Thank you. And that article, it does sound vaguely familiar for some reason. And for whatever reason, I feel that this discussion is going to deteriorate in attack on social media and everything that's bad about it.
Well, no, Clakkey. Once we have students actually become critical about what their view on social media and their point to where they can debunk what they're looking at, I'll actually give social media full marks.
Wow. And here am I stuck with my half a mark. And as we say in the youthful parlance, right now I'm in my feelings. Don't talk to me.
All right, Clakkey, you got your points back.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. Now, in the context of where you guys work, does media literacy education take place there? And do you think that it should be a separate subject, or should it be infused in that particular subject being taught where applicable?
Well, for me, I work as a preschool teacher, so my 4-year-old students will not be using social media or literacy, or not literacy, but media in general. So I hope they're not. But as far as, it being taught in education, like in high school, I think that's something that's very important with being taught because, at that age, children are getting into, YouTubing, there's cyberbullying. And there's so much that is out there right now with technology that I think that media literacy education should be definitely taught.
Right, and from like a similar, teacher standpoint as Jeannell, I teach students that are severely disabled. So most of my students aren't really directly involved with media literacy all day, but some of my students do, use the computer or use the iPads, and they are seeing things on certain platforms. So I do feel that it's really important, especially at a middle school and high school level, to kind of, teach media literacy and infuse it into all subjects, because with the way of the future, media literacy is, only on the rise. And I just feel that we need to be able to teach students, what is, maybe real media literacy and what might be fake, which kind of brings me into some of the questions that I had when I was reading this week. And it is, what about its impact on fake news? Do we think that it's actually working? Will it get better, or people just believe what they want to believe? Are we just going to keep getting fake news, or keep looking into things and having to wonder if it's real, or is it even, going to get better?
As far as fake news, I think it's, the impact is, whether or not students are going to really listen to what, is coming out with what they're hearing, whether it's fake news or not. And, with things that are going around saying that, people saying that, that there's no such thing as global warming. With global warming, that's something that people say that is fake news, but I think it's something that, people have to decide whether or not they believe it or not. And as we can see with everything going on in Australia and whatnot, I think that, global warming is such a thing, but with it working, I'm not sure. I think it really all depends on the person, on the individual, and I don't know if it's going to get better in time. People are just going to believe what they want to believe.
I agree, Jeannell. I concur with you. It's amazing how much fake news is pushed on a daily basis, and you wonder what is the intent, why people alter the message the way they do. But I think through learning and sensitization, and at some point that we'll get to where we can analyze and apply critical thinking to make sure that we are not being fooled.
I definitely agree.
Yeah. So the author actually spoke to future impact and felt that if media literacy is to be successful in the future, we need to do the following. And that would be to develop a coherent understanding of media environment, improve cross-disciplinary collaboration, leverage the current media crisis to consolidate stakeholders, and also to prioritize the creation of a national media literacy evidence base, and lastly, to develop curricula for addressing action in addition to interpretation. So do you guys have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think all 5 of those are extremely important, especially in an educational setting. Just looking at number 5, we do need to develop some type of curriculum to address, almost interpretation of the internet and the media, and, how we are, picking through and going through these things, and, really using our minds and using critical thinking skills to, make sure what we're reading is concrete and real. I think we just need to be more cognizant and aware of what we are doing in terms of media, and make sure we're using those strategies when researching and when reading and learning new things. What are your thoughts, Clakkey?
I agree. And number 3, leveraging the current media crisis to consolidate stakeholders. I like that because no man is an island, and we all need to work together and recognize that when things happen, no one is going to individually say Clakkey or Shannon or Jeannell. They're going to say those people from the United States or New York, etc.
Right.
So when we can get buying from persons who have the capital and the resources to recognize that we are all in this together, then we should see some improvement in the right direction.
Right, I totally agree. And I feel like there's something to say about empowerment, that when it creates buy-in and ownership, so youth participation goes really a long way. Like training for teachers and provision for curricular resources, parental support, policy and evidence-based, so that best practices are actually utilized. Bulger and Davison actually mentioned the media literacy programs addressed issues of misinformation and copyright and plagiarism, information credibility, and even bullying, which is something that I feel very strongly about. Actually, they mentioned in a study of 283 students from 38 participating high schools, Hobbs found that this experience significantly improved, self-reported measures of intellectual curiosity, like the desire to learn about all sides of an issue, questioning things that they read or heard, having curiosity about ways to actually solve these issues in their community, and actually comparing facts and opinions. Students also improved in showing respect for others' ideas even when they disagreed, and I think that's the concrete feeling here, is that we have to have respect for others' thoughts, but still listen to their opinions.
Yeah, I completely agree. Clakkey, have you of Bulger and Majoo?
No, I haven't. Who is he, and what was that about?
So this book that I'm reading called True Enough: Learning to Live in a Post-Fact Literacy.
Oh, I know that book. Majoo probes the cognitive basis of what's true and how one's perception indeed can end up being one's actual reality. And at the end of his introduction, he asks the question, how can so many people who live in the same place see the world so differently? And I think that's my biggest takeaway. I thought that statement was so bold, and I was curious if you guys had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading that that's the exact last thing that he says in his introduction, and it really stood out to me how he said that exact question, because it's true, like with people, things around the world so differently, it's very true, because with how the news is today, and then just how other people's opinion are, people just see the world so different depending on how they view the world, depending on what they see, what they believe in as well.
Right.
I totally agree. My mind goes back to one of the readings that we have in terms of when we're teaching students, and one of the things that we're encouraged to do is to take them from the known, their own experiences, and take them to new places. And I think this is definitely one of the reasons why that our experiences impact our worldview. So really we can all be looking at the same thing and have totally different perspectives on that.
Right, I agree. And I feel like it's your experiences, how you are raised, your morals, that kind of lead us to perceive things a certain way. And I guess essentially that's why we all view the world differently, because we all come from a different place and a different background. But chapter 1 of his book is called Facts Don't Matter.
What do you mean facts don't matter, Shannon?
It's a little bit more of a paradox.
All right, I got you.
So in chapter 3, Trusting Your Senses, Selective Perception, in 9/11, Majoo says that selective perception says that even when two people are opposing ideologies, overcome their tendency towards selective exposure and choose to watch the same thing. They may still end up being pushed apart from one another. Each of them will have seen, heard, felt, and understood the thing vastly differently from the other who experienced it.
Yeah, and actually in that chapter, they just do a really great job with pinpointing different moments in history where we actually see that happen. One that really pertains very well to what you just said, Jeannell, is that football game that they talked about between, I believe it was Dartmouth and Providence. And, there was some talk about some aggression in the game. And, both sides just really did not see eye to eye. One side said that the other team was really aggressive, but that team didn't feel they were aggressive at all. And basically they experienced the same exact game, but nobody felt the exact same way. In the chapter, they also touched upon, Kennedy's death, our president, and people have different theories of what happened after looking at a video. We're all looking at the same video, but some people think this happened, some people think this happened. The biggest point they touched on is, 9/11 and how, some people feel that there's one reason why 9/11 happened, and then others believe, that the government may have made it happen on purpose, which is, a conspiracy theory. And it just goes to show that, based on what you believe and however you perceive information, that's really what you're going to stick with. It's hard to change your mind once you're there. And those people seem to stick in that same spot. Clakkey, I know you didn't, you're going off of what we're explaining about chapter 3, but do you have any views or insight on that?
It's interesting that you mentioned conspiracy theorists. I'm biased towards anyone who has that type of worldview, but I realize more and more that this is the world that we live in.
Definitely.
And from listening to you guys and what you read, it seems as though that these people have spent a lot of time trying to prove their belief.
Oh yeah, they did their research.
Right.
And it's scary that, it reminds me of the saying that we have that a man convinced against himself is of the same opinion. So it doesn't matter what you try to tell them. Is once they believe the thing to be so, it's definitely the truth.
Right. They're convinced.
Right.
Which is crazy.
And but that's the world we live in, unfortunately. But I'm glad that we had this discourse, and I'm glad that I got my extra half a point. But having had the discussion, I think I would settle for just the half point, because I have learned so much as to the different shade of meaning when it comes to media literacy, the importance of it, that we need to help guide persons to analyze and think critically for themselves, dissect the information to find out what's true, what's false. It's been a pleasure, guys, going through this with you.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.
Any closing words from you?
No, I think that we all had some similar views, and I think that we all kind of brought in our own experiences to kind of make sense of media literacy and some of the issues we see within it. And I had a really great time discussing it with you guys.
Yeah, definitely fun, and earned that point, Clakkey, that half a point.
Thank goodness.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Yes, you too.